I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
G'day everyone, it's TGU time on a very warm day in Victoria. We've been waiting for a string of these warm days, haven't we, team? Tony Raunic and Julie Reid are here. How are we?
Loving the weather.
And Julie, we missed you last week.
Oh,
You've been busy out and about.
I know. I'm traveling around Victoria and having a great time meeting lots of local government people and lots of councillors in this exciting time of the year.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a euphemism for really busy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Tony, how's your week been? I know you've been
Yes,
out as well.
up at sunny Kerrang on Monday, which was great. Talking about social media with councillors, managed to congrats to the new mayor Ross Stanton. I know we're going to talk about mayors and mayoral elections, but I think I managed to be the first session that Ross chaired, I think, after the mayoral election. So that was nice.
And what could you possibly have to talk about with councillors about social media, Tony?
Oh, yes, such a topic that prevails, isn't it, right across the sector and in a lot of the councillor conduct cases. So it was great to sort of break it down with the councillors and exec team and talk through the do's and don'ts.
Absolutely. All right. We've been getting some great feedback from recent episodes. Please keep that interaction coming. We love to know your thoughts, and particularly if we've missed something, which we occasionally do. Here's a quick rundown of what we've got to talk about today. Of course, that tragic incident in Hepburn last week has hit home for a lot of people in a couple of municipalities. We've got Merri-bek Council's Palestine resolution making news. Strathbogie Council on notice, potentially about to be suspended by the minister. We'll explain why. Glenelg monitors, we're yet to know who they are, but the terms of reference have been published. As Tony mentioned, lots of mayoral election results. A loss for Hepburn Shire as a gain for Bass Coast Shire. We'll tell you what that's all about. And some interesting stuff from interstate as well, including a mayor who's been removed from office as we record, having been found to have committed serious corrupt conduct. Lots to deal with there, chaps. Where do we want to start? Perhaps Merri-bek and the Palestine resolution. It's making big news. The latest, as we record this morning, is the Premier not impressed that the council's getting involved in an international incident like this, and one of the councillors, in fact, I think all of the 4 councillors who voted against it have received some sort of threats, which is just horrific to hear, the death threats. Oscar Yildiz has been outspoken about that. Guys, what do we think about this? Merri-bek making a stand, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, condemning the Israel response to the Hamas attacks. Pretty difficult stuff, isn't it, to deal with at the local level?
Yeah, I think they went quite further than that, Chris. I think they've called for an end to diplomatic, political, business relations with Israel.
It was pretty detailed. You're right, Tony. There was a lot in it. I think they're getting a report looking at whether they've got any contracts with companies that might have associations there that should be cancelled.
References to war crimes, these sorts of things. 11 paragraphs, and we really can't do it justice today, folks. We couldn't read it out. They're long paragraphs, and it's a long resolution. But yes, certainly there would be some controversy there in terms of condemning what they describe as war crimes by the Israel and the Israeli army, etc. And the motion, part of the motion to fly the Palestinian flag at the Coburg Civic Centre for 6 months. So, quite a significant period of time.
I guess the angle, Tony and Julie, that we should possibly spend a minute or two on is this. It pops up every now and then, this idea of local councils getting involved in issues and making resolutions about things that many people say just isn't the remit of local councils. What do we think about that?
Yeah, Chris, and I think this is why they're coming under fire potentially from the state government, because the state are probably not seeing this as, sort of core services that council are offering the community. It's playing into a very highly charged political debate. I can understand what they're trying to do in terms of, trying to provide some support to their community. And I believe that there were a lot of community that were out in the streets around this issue.
Hundreds, I believe, yeah.
That's right. So, look, I'm a bit surprised to see this and how far it goes in terms of all of those points that it makes. It even has some quotes in the notice of motion as well that was put up, which I thought was unusual for this kind of motion to put forward to council. Look, I'm a bit worried about councils that take this kind of topic and politicise it and stir up the community. And I'm really sad to hear that some councillors are being threatened by members of the community because they haven't supported the motion. So
there's no place for that, is there?
No, definitely not. They've chosen to put it forward. They have their rights to do that, but it's a very highly charged topic, and it's whether or not really this is the right forum to be able to have this kind of conversation. I'm a bit nervous about it.
Tony, the Local Government Act gives councils some autonomy, though, to determine what are the issues they want to deal with to represent their particular community, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Absolutely it does. And they're there, as I said, it's specifically part of the role is to represent, the diversity of interests in the community. Look, I'd say, I acknowledge there is a view out there, a view that I'm sympathetic with, as Julie has expressed, that councils should avoid comment on international matters and stick to local matters. There's that view out there, and I have some sympathy for that. I think that the Commonwealth government has access to, security information and that local councils simply don't have. That being said, I have some respect for what the Mayor Angelica Panopoulos said, and she says that conflict and human rights is always, is always part of council business. We'll call it out, in other words, where we see it, wherever it occurs. And I should say that the resolution did condemn both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. It did call for the release of all hostages. So, there was that element there. But look, I think the longer this conflict goes, the more we're going to see, a diversity of views out there in both the community and as a result in the local government sector, because, they talk about the fog of war. I know myself from personal experience in the 90s, early 90s, the Balkan War in Croatia, where I have a lot of family, I visit there often, is that as wars progress, we find that there are going to be errors, mistakes, even atrocities committed on both sides. That's just what happens in wars. And understandably, parties are going to call that out, and I've seen that happen firsthand. And we know, World War II, we know that, we were the victors there, but there were things that occurred. There was carpet bombing of Germany. We dropped atomic bombs on Japan. There is going to be, in the course of a conflict, terrible things happen on both sides, and I think that the council's in a difficult position trying to reflect a diversity of views in the community, and we can't really call this one out unless we do similar in relation to Glen Eira and Stonington in their, solidarity expressions with Israel. So really, there are some councils, I think, that there is a particular concentration of a particular cultural group or community within that council, and perhaps the council laws are reflecting some of the community views there. But clearly not unanimous in
I think
this
you've
council.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Tony. For some time, I've felt it's an inevitable direction we're going in with more multiculturalism, but this increasing politicization, I guess, of the local level of politics that's happening, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and I think we understand that there's a similar type motion foreshadowed in Maribyrnong. A councillor has come out and indicated, I think it's George Uquera.
Jorge Uquera.
Jorge, well done, you pronounced it right. According to media reports, at least later this month, there'll be a similar resolution debated at Maribyrnong. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this interstate as well. There are strong concentrations of people from the Middle East and the Levant, sort of in Western Sydney as well.
Well, we talked about last week the deputy mayor at, I think it was Waverley, being removed from office because he voted against a motion condemning the Hamas attack. So you've got councils everywhere, I think, starting to grapple with this, despite what the Premier might say. And Julie, another thing we noted in the media, I believe there's I don't know what you call it, something circulating around the sector for councillors to sign in support of this cause as well.
Yeah, and look, with that circulating around and tugging on those heartstrings of the councillors and them wanting to be vocal and do something about it, then I can understand why they're bringing these kinds of motions forward. That is the only control, I suppose, that the councillors do have to get a decision by council, and so they're using this as a mechanism. Look, it's a really tough one. I agree with both of you about things getting more political. At the end of the day, it's about, supporting the local community in the best way that local government can. I don't know what the best answer to that is. Is it being more political and making a stand on international issues, or is it about trying to work out what do these local people need that are potentially suffering as a result of something that's happening elsewhere. Yeah. So I just think that's the question around, where do you focus this? But it's not obviously, I'm being practical about it all, and it's not necessarily reflected in what's happening in practice.
All right. I suspect it won't be the last time we talk about this. As Tony said, at least one more council considering, or one councillor considering bringing forward a similar motion. So stay tuned, and we'll come back to it if and when we need to. Do want to note the tragic incident in Daylesford last weekend. 5 people lost their lives. Some reports at one point were saying 6, but I do believe it's 5 with some injuries. This has hit the Hepburn Shire community and Daylesford in particular very hard. The mayor has made some statements about supporting the community, and they've put lots of counselling initiatives in place, etc. It's also hit the Wyndham community, where I think most of those victims are from. But Tony, one of those victims was a council candidate at the last election for one of the wards in Wyndham.
That's correct. Sorry, I don't have a name in front of me, Mike, Chris, but
it's Pratibha Sharma. It was
Pratibha Sharma. That's right. Who had run for Wyndham. Also, I think at a state government level, significant person in the local Sikh community, I believe. And look, I was up at in Hepburn Shire on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I, I'm a ratepayer. I keep a house there, and I saw, and I know the site really, really well. I know that park where people do gather, and I just think it's as I say, it's a tragedy. It's also sad. I think that inevitably we're probably going to see that opportunity for people to gather in that spot is probably going to be severely restricted moving forwards, given that there's been this loss of life. You would imagine that there'll be measures taken to minimise risk, and that will probably involve people not being able to sit on those picnic tables and have a glass of wine or a meal that they've bought at the pub. So it's just a terrible thing when these things happen, and you immediately think about, has it affected anyone in your family or anyone you know? And then you feel for the people involved and, the people who had to view this. But there was a really significant contribution from bystanders, I understand, to, conducting CPR, assisting the emergency services, etc. And as Brian Hood, the mayor of Hepburn, said, this will have a big impact on the community, and there's a healing process now going on at Hepburn, and council's very central to that and very active. Well done.
Yeah, and I do understand people within the council are feeling this pretty hard as well. This sort of has a ripple effect through not just the community, but the council organisation as well, doesn't it, Julie?
Oh, yeah. Look, and it's a small organisation, and, they're very connected to a lot of the local businesses, and they, they're very, they're physically very close to this location as well. So hats off to them. I did notice some great work going on by Councillor Leslie Hewitt as well, who's, I think, the Deputy Mayor up there, and messages out from Bradley Thomas, the CEO, assuring people that the council are doing everything that they can to support the community through this, which is great to see. But yes, they will be feeling it. Any tragedy like this will affect people in different ways, and our thoughts go out to those people at Hepburn Shire that are doing an amazing job in helping the community bounce back from something that's so tragic.
Absolutely. Our thoughts go out to all those affected. Let's have a look at some other news stories that have popped up this week. We've been speculating, particularly Tony and I last week, Julie, in your absence, about what might be happening at Strathbogie. One of the councillors there has spoken out to the media, contrary to any particular policy and without authorisation, as tends to happen sometimes. Revealing that the minister has written to Strathbogie Council and is seeking a response as to why that council or those councillors should not be suspended. According to the Aroa Gazette, today, Friday the 10th of November, is the deadline for that response, and Councillor Robin Weatherald has told the press that the Mayor there, Laura Binks, is considering responding in the affirmative. Yes, councillors should be suspended. Does that surprise you, Tony?
Well, no, I've certainly heard of councillors calling for a suspension in the past. That has occurred. Councillor Weatherald, I think, has indicated that he wouldn't support such a call. I think he was only elected on account back in July of this year when Councillor Dave Andrews resigned. But
a former councillor going back further in time. Correct.
Yeah, he has that experience. But yes. This show cause notice has apparently gone out, according to this media report, and there's a deadline of today for councillors to respond to state government as to why they ought not be suspended. And it's not looking good for the for the interim in terms of local democracy. It's at Strathbogie, I would think.
And the Monitor's report hasn't been released at this stage. So it's interesting if you go back and have a look at Janet Dorr, the previous Monitor's report, which was not that long ago, which recommended that they continue to have a monitor, which is where Peter Stevenson, I think, was appointed. If you have a look at the governance type issues, they were around decisions and training and understanding roles and responsibilities, and there was this big long induction program, but there was still issues around that. There's issues around potentially councillors getting into the detail and crossing over maybe into the space of where the CEO should be, and so having that tension around interactions between councillors and staff, health and safety she talked about. And overall sort of policies and processes and practices being sharpened up. So there was a lot in that initial report from Janet Dorr, and whether or not they've had enough time to be able to rectify all of that, probably not. There's a lot in that report. My suspicions are that because it's not quite where it needs to be at, that's why the minister's gone, okay, show cause. Tell me why you shouldn't go. There's some systemic issues there, I think.
So what we do know is there's a second monitor's report that hasn't been released, that is with the monitor. There have been, that's an unfortunate slip, the monster, the monitor. We know that some more councillors have resigned. There's 2 extraordinary vacancies showing on the council's website at the moment. There's been no public statement about those latest departures. We also read from the press, Councillor Weatherall makes the comment about misconduct, and in his view, there's been no misconduct. But with respect to Councillor Weatherall and knowing the way he's approached the role over the years, I suspect his definition is probably a little bit different to that in the standards of conduct as set down in the regulations, Tony.
Yeah, it could be. And, I would think that, with those looming by-elections, we'll see, a ministerial decision quite quickly, potentially to kind of, to step in and prior to the need for those by-elections to occur. Yeah.
Well, clearly that's why there's been no movement on that front while this plays out. So we're still in a wait and see situation there on Strathbogie, I think. But once again, our thoughts to the organisation there, the CEO, Julie, and the team. It's a difficult time to be navigating, no doubt.
Yeah.
Another council that is going to have monitors, we don't know who they are yet, is Glenelg. As announced about a week ago, the minister intends to put 2 monitors in for 3 months, and this week Glenelg published the terms of reference for those monitors on their website. And Julie and Tony, it's as you would expect to look at governance functions and provide advice, and that includes conduct issues as well.
Yes, it certainly does, Chris. And it's really interesting because it's quite detailed in the requirements. It talks about the processes and actions in relation to the appointment of the acting or interim CEO. It talks about policies and processes, the employment remuneration committee for the CEO. It also talks about councillors understanding their performance and their statutory roles and responsibilities. The similar theme that it's coming through to what we're hearing about in Strathbogie. So this is on the slippery slope of governance, where governance is not so effective anymore and gets to this situation where all of these things need to be reviewed. They talk about relationships between councillors and council staff, respect under the code of conduct, resolving disputes. So there's a lot in this. There's a lot for a monitor to look at in 3 months. So my guess will be that it'll be probably longer than that, but and that's not everything that's on the list. But that gives you a sense of where the challenges and issues are down at Glenelg.
Yeah, they're very broad terms of reference. I'd say they're cutting it fine for announcement of monitors. I think they're starting on Monday.
Yes.
I had a look at the Local Government Victoria website before we went on air, folks, and I couldn't see any announcements as yet other than the terms of reference, but I imagine we're probably going to get an announcement of those names at some stage today. So and of course those monitors will then write a report to the minister with recommendations, and that as I say, broad terms of reference, and will be really, really interesting, the approach that is taken in Glenelg, given the significant number of resignations of councillors and of course the CEO Paul Phelan.
Well, let's not forget 2 CEOs within 10 months.
2 CEOs.
Yeah. So the recruitment of an acting or appointment of an acting or an interim CEO, as you note, is in those terms of reference. The other complicating factor here, potentially, for both Strathbogie and Glenelg, is we're inside the last 12 months of a council term, and if the minister wants to take any particular action, I just look at Moira. They've been replaced with administrators for 5.5 years through to 2028. So there's an open question there about what sort of intervention, if any, and for how long. All right, just let that one
Wait
sit
and
there.
see.
And we'll wait and see, as you say, Julie. Keep an eye on the Local Government News Roundup website. As soon as we know those monitors, we will put that information up for you. I don't think, Tony, here's one for the Legal Eagle. Do monitors need to be gazetted, the appointment of monitors? I know administrators do, but I did look at the Government Gazette and there's nothing there, but maybe it won't show there.
I have no idea. Is the short answer.
There's a,
Don't they
there's
just
a,
have to be? Don't they just have to be appointed by the minister?
Yes, you're probably
Yeah.
right. It's not like an administrator, is it?
No.
Okay, let's move on. Lots of mayoral elections being trumpeted and celebrated over the past week. Let's have a look at some of these off the list. I'm not trying to be exhaustive here, so if we miss someone, apologies, it's not intentional. Fiona Stitfold at Bayside, I think, is a first-time mayor elected there this week. We've got Alan Getley returned as mayor at Bulloak. We have, I think we've already done East Gippsland. You've mentioned Gannawarra, Tony, with Ross Stanton there as mayor. Glenelg, which we were just talking about, Karen Stevens has been elected mayor, and they've decided this year not to have a deputy mayor, and perhaps having some vacant council or positions is part of the thinking there. What I am noticing, Tony and Julie, is I think the number of councils to not have a deputy mayor is going to be increased upon last year. There were 5, I think, last year. It's looking like there's going to be 6, 7, 8 potentially councils not having a deputy mayor for the last year of the council term. What do you think that means?
I don't know what that means. It's a bit, I'm surprised. I'm surprised if that's going up. I thought that that would continue to be more popular. With the recognition of how much work is required by the mayor, and that having that deputy there to support and to pick up some of the role as well, is I think, great idea. So I'm actually surprised at that. I don't really have the answers to that unless Tony's heard something around the sector.
No, look, I think it's probably a case-by-case situation. In some instances, councils, appoint a deputy as almost the successor in waiting, and that wouldn't apply in the lead up to an election year. But we've often see, so in the Gannawarra example, the former mayor, Charlie Gillingham, is now the deputy mayor. So in there, I guess, supporting a first-time mayor in Councillor Stanton. So I think each council will have its own unique circumstances here.
Absolutely. And I'll talk about one of those in just a second. Greater Bendigo is the only council that flags who the mayor and deputy are going to be ahead of time and classifies them as mayor-elect and deputy mayor-elect. And they then formally appointed Andrea Metcalf to, I think, a 3rd consecutive term as mayor this week, with Matthew Evans, 2nd time in the deputy mayor role. The interesting one, actually, before I get to that, Brett Ireland is returned as the mayor at Hindmarsh, and Wendy Bywaters, who I know is a viewer and supporter of VLGA Connect, is deputy mayor. Congratulations to Wendy. The one that I thought was interesting was Northern Grampians, because there was quite some debate about the office of deputy mayor, and there were multiple nominations. There were 2 nominations for the mayor, and there was a 4-3 split there on both those issues, on the election of the mayor and on the determination to have a deputy mayor, which ultimately they decided not to have. And one of the issues that was raised there in not having a deputy mayor was the additional cost that is imposed on the organisation to have an office of deputy mayor. So that might go some way to answering your question there, Julie. Jenna Davey-Burns is the new mayor at Kingston City.
Yes, but interesting there, Chris. We've also got a female deputy mayor, which is the first time in history at Kingston to have both the mayor and the deputy mayor, who's Councillor Tracy Davies, 2 females, mayor and deputy mayor situation. So, quite thrilled to see that, considering I was the first and only female CEO at Kingston.
Of course.
Really, really interesting to see that they've now got 2 females in that role for the first time ever.
Terrific. Manningham also has appointed women as mayor and deputy mayor, Carly Lang and Laura Main. I'm not sure if that's a first for Manningham, but if it is, we celebrate that as well. Cook Lamb, terrific hardworking councillor at Maribyrnong, back in the mayoralty for, I think, the second time, and very experienced former mayor Michael Clark is the deputy. Kylie Spears, very active in promoting the role of women in local government and equity issues. Kylie is the new mayor of Maroondah, with Paul McDonald as deputy. Who else? We missed Liam Wood being re-elected as mayor of Mildura. That happened a little bit under the radar last week. And we might just leave it there. We've another all-female team to mention at Port Phillip, with Heather Consolo returned as mayor and Louise Crawford as deputy. But we're adding all of those to the list on the Local Government News Roundup website as we become aware of them, so you can keep up to date there.
Yeah, and Chris, big shout out. I met Mayor Tom Crook and Deputy Mayor Jane Greason from East Gippsland this week. Absolute pleasure to work with such a lovely bunch of people.
Excellent. All right. There you go. Now, I mentioned a loss for Hepburn Shire and again for Bass Coast, and we're talking about The Block, that television show that apparently a lot of people watch. I never have. You're shaking your head too, Julie. I know I've asked Tony, and I don't think Tony watches it either, but somebody does, because it apparently tops the ratings, and it's going to Phillip Island.
I watched a bit of it.
Have you? No.
20th season, folks. The 20th season. So it's doing something right.
Yeah.
But I think you said a loss for Hepburn. I don't know that was the local view. I mean, some of the businesses did, but I think some of the community were happy to see it not be located in Dalesford, but off to Phillip Island. This time we might see a bit of a penguin theme maybe in some of the rooms.
Well, we may, but already the inevitable questions about how are they going to manage that, given the attention it's going to get, the traffic increases, one way in and off the island. I guess the council has thought really hard about how those sorts of issues are going to be managed, balancing that against the exposure that the area will get from being represented on the program.
Yeah,
there's a huge traffic issue. I don't know if you've been there on a long weekend. It's a really difficult exercise.
So, Chris, this is the Island Cove Villas site, I believe, that the Herald Sun were reporting on. I don't really know that site, but you know, how central it is to that really, really busy spot. I'm not 100% sure. Looks like it might be a little bit on the edge, but you've still got that, you know, traffic congestion coming in across the bridge, as you say.
Yeah, and some environmental issues to be sensitively handled as well, I suspect. All right, good luck to all involved with that. Good luck to all who've nominated for the LG Pro Board elections. It's that time once again. Julie, you're a former board member at LG Pro. What are these people going through at the moment trying to get noticed to get enough votes to get on the board?
Well, I've noticed there's a few messages coming out on LinkedIn, Chris. I don't know whether you've both noticed that as well, but you know, it's really hard actually, because I don't think senior people in local government are really comfortable with putting themselves out there to be voted on. You know, it's kind of feels like you're in that councillor territory. So, but, you know, to become a board member, you obviously need to get the support. So I believe there are 10 positions available and 14 nominees.
Right.
So the nominees that are running are Anthony Basford, Kathy Henderson, James Sturton, Jason Ferrugia, Leanne Manton, Renee Littlejohn, Tanya Cicluna, Sue Wilkinson, Bruce Dobson, Chris Levers, Gail Gatt, Jennifer Bednar, and Sally Jones, and also Liana Thompson. So
how do you pick? How do you pick between that stellar list?
Those amazing people.
Yes.
That's really difficult. So that's why they're pitching themselves out there in different ways. You know, some of them will not. Some of them do it very gently. Some of them try to provide a bit more information about what they can bring. So good luck to them all. They're all really worthy candidates too, I'm sure. But yeah, it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's having the numbers, isn't it, as they say?
Well, it is. So the results will be announced at the LG Pro AGM on the 23rd of November. I've got a special place in my heart for LG Pros. I'm sure you do, Julie. I'm not sure if you've done much work with them, Tony, but we wish them all the best. Absolutely. They do a terrific job on behalf of the professionals working in the sector in Victoria. Okay, mayors in New South Wales in the news this week. We've had three particular stories that caught my eye. The big one, the now suspended mayor of Canada Bay, Angelo Sirikas, has been found by ICAC to have engaged in serious corrupt conduct. ICAC has recommended suspension with a view to dismissal, seeking advice from the DPP about potential prosecutions, not just of Mr. Sirikas, but two other individuals as well. And they've made 4 recommendations to avoid the corruption identified in the investigation happening in future. Tony, the Minister for Local Government in New South Wales, moved very quickly on the release of that report yesterday to suspend Mr. Sirikas from office.
Yeah, some real parallels with Operation Sandon and the findings in relation to some City of Casey councillors here. Serious corrupt conduct findings in relation to receiving benefits from a developer and an agent associated with the developer. I think $18,000 worth of overseas flights and accommodation. Again, similar to Operation Sandon, some failures to declare conflicts of interests where there'd been, political donations from interested parties to the mayor in planning matters, and he'd failed to declare. So, yes, he is no longer the mayor, no longer a councillor in City of Canada Bay, in that sort of inner west area of Sydney.
Should say, from a process point of view, I think he's just suspended with a view to dismissal. That seems a likely outcome, but I guess the process needs to run its course there. And the deputy mayor has been put in to undertake the duties of the mayor in this suspension period until we get some further advice.
Yeah, and you think there's enough sort of headline stories and enough sort of examples now for councillors to learn from, to see that, the developer space, decisions and the power that the councillors have, the temptation of receiving gifts or benefits, it's just, you get caught out.
It's just not worth it, is it? But it still happens, although we should note this behaviour happened a few years ago now, but I have no doubt that, there'll be more examples we're talking about in a few years of things that are happening as we speak, potentially.
Yeah, it's really disappointing, I think, as a sector, to see it continuing. It's, and on such a large scale as well, where there's, big gifts and benefits.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, another mayor in the news this week out of Sydney is the mayor of Ryde. This is Sarkis Yedelian, OAM, who has called out some of his own councillors for being behind leaks to the media. There's been a few media reports about the financial situation at the city of Ryde. They've got this huge civic project, former town hall, which I think is now a hole in the ground.
It is.
Millions and millions of dollars going into that, and people are very concerned about the financial direction of that council not being helped, Tony, by councillors speaking out of school.
Well, that's certainly the view of the Mayor, Councillor Yedelian. This is, as you say, a major project in the middle of Ryde, the Ryde Central project. It's, essentially redevelopment of the city central area. And that's, as you say, is a big hole in the ground, all hoarded up with $113 million shortfall. The allegation that's been published is that, that there's been allegation that there's been a transfer of essentially largely developer contributions from these, restricted reserve funds into the project, is the allegation, some $35 million. So the mayor has said, whilst the mayor's been indicated some disappointment at media comments from other councillors and, as you say, confidential material getting out in the public arena, has said, look, there'll be a detailed report to council at the ordinary council meeting on the 28th of November, an open meeting, and that report will be made available to the public for transparency purposes. So, if you like, all will be revealed in that appropriate forum. And there does seem to be some, significant financial issues at council at the moment relating to this project. There's been, I think, some of the stuff that's been reported and the mayor's concerned about is that council will be selling public assets to fund the shortfall. Even the notion of selling this Ryde Central development to a developer. And it's got about 10 years ago, the proposition was build apartments there, and council quashed that.
Right.
And so the community is a bit concerned about a return potentially to that scenario.
There's some political undertones to this, as you read between the lines, and former council decisions, etc., as you've alluded to, Tony, that there's a bit more at play here under the surface, I think. Julie, another example, though, of councillors feeling like they don't want to be hamstrung by a council organisation's media policy or guidelines.
That's right. So they just go out there and just tell it as it is. And, what's the penalty for doing that would be the question in New South Wales. But look, I think that, again, you see this because they get so frustrated that they have to disclose. They have to go and speak to the media. They have to disclose something. We've seen that in the previous example of where we're talking about correspondence from the minister. So, so councillors they get frustrated. They release that information, and they know that there's potentially consequences, but they're not really worried about that, and they just want to get their message out because they've got a point to make, which is not helpful for the organisation.
And I guess they justify it perhaps in their own minds as being necessary for openness and transparency in communicating with the community.
Yeah, maybe. And there is a lot of pressure now, particularly in Victoria, around transparency and openness, and so so they justify it in that way. They use it to their benefit, I suppose. But then equally, obviously, in this case, the Ryde Mayor has come back and said, well, we're going to be transparent. We're going to tell you exactly what it is that's going on. So
there's a process and a right order for everything. You were shaking your head there a moment ago, Tony.
Well, I think often it's a case that the councillor who gets to the media first is concerned that that they want the attention. They don't want they want to get out there and be the one that the spotlight's on, not seeing that occurring in that sort of collective forum through the mayor sometimes. And I think in this case, one of the councillors who's come out and allegedly spoke to the media is a political rival of the mayor, has had some involvement in this project as well. And so I think there's an imperative of people to, get their narratives right, get out there and, perhaps put the position as best they can for themselves early in the piece. But look, I think the mayor's doing the right thing, or the council are doing the right thing in terms of releasing that report publicly. And, if there has been inappropriate use of, reserved funds, then, the equivalent of our Auditor General would be getting involved, one would think. And, that would involve more than just the councillors. One would think it would involve some of the officers as well.
And this is where I think there's that, personal gain as opposed to reputation of the council. The reputation of the council is brought down as a result of those comments for someone who potentially wants it for personal gain because of politics or whatever. So there is that issue, and I think that's what I don't sit comfortably with, because at the end of the day, we should be managing the reputation of the council, in front of the community, because, we don't want to lose the trust of the community in any of these circumstances.
That's something we could probably play devil's advocate and debate for quite some time, but good discussion. Thank you for that. I've got a question for you both. should local councils be able to operate mobile speed cameras when they've got an issue with excessive speeding in their streets?
Yes, that's interesting. An interesting question, Chris. Sorry,
What
I'm
do you
going to
what do you
jump in
think?
on here because I've
Yeah.
read this report about Liverpool City Council. They're urging New South Wales government to take action to combat, the alarming increase in recklessness on the roads.
Yeah,
And
this is we might
tragic
just set
loss.
just set the scene, Julie. This is Ned Manoon, who's the mayor of Liverpool, where they've had, I think, 4 deaths in some serious traffic incidents within the span of 4 months. He's saying to the government, give us the power to operate mobile speed cameras so that we can control this excessive speeding that's claiming lives on our local streets.
That's right. That's right. And they don't want to stand back. They want to be really active in this space. They're actually making it quite clear in their report that they're not wanting it for revenue raising.
Yeah.
They're really wanting it. They want people to lose points off their license, but they don't want to necessarily generate any revenue as a result of them having their own mobile speed cameras. Now, we have advisory signs that go up, electronic ones we use, I know, across councils to alert people to their speed. Okay, we put those in local roads to alert people to the fact that a local road is a 50-kilometre speed limit, and you've just gone over it, so you get a sad face. Or if you're on the limit, then you get a smiley face. And that's an educative sort of, I suppose, way to go about, trying to help the community be aware of their speeds in local roads. And I've got no problem with that because it's part of the program of education of motorists. Whereas this one is taking it that, one step further and stepping into the domain of what we see as being state government controlled and funded. I'm a bit concerned about going into this space from a funding point of view. Once you start, you cannot stop. And it's very expensive to have mobile speed cameras. Once one council does it, is there an expectation that they all roll it out? Can they really afford it is my question. So I'm not a big fan of councils taking on this role when I think it's, again, duplicating a role that needs to be done by state government, and is, they've got the money to have the cameras, they've got they've got the clout behind it all, they've got the data behind it all. Councils picking this up. Imagine the amount of work involved in that, even just collecting data and reporting back, etc. I just think this is moving into a direction where you're starting to blur the lines between local and state.
Thumbs down from Julie. Tony, what do you think?
Oh, look, similar view. I think we've got other authorities that are better at this. I think there'd be a whole bunch of CEOs going, not another thing for for us to get complaints about.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I read this story, it triggered a memory for me, the name of the council and the mayor. And I went back, and sure enough, in November of last year, 2022, Ned Manoon, the mayor of Liverpool, was taking on the state government successfully, ultimately, calling for the reduction in speed limits in the CBD in Liverpool that went down to 30k an hour under the state government, calling for that to be cancelled and the speed limits to be increased. And sure enough, they were increased to 40k an hour. I'm not saying that that's where the issue is in the accidents, but the mayor's, got form here, if you like, calling for the government to, to stop some speed limitation measures in his own CBD only a year ago. So that's interesting. That's kind of a reversal of approach seemingly today.
Good little piece of research there, Tony. Well done. All right. So we'll wait and see. You can imagine what the state government's response is going to be to that, but he's certainly got some attention for the issue, which might be the main driver for making a call like that. Conscious of time, we've been talking for a while. A couple of other things we did want to talk about before we go. It's that time of year when councils start to trot out their Christmas decorations, and apparently over in Adelaide, they're a bit tired. Some would say it's been described as going for the povo look, which the deputy mayor has rejected, but he has admitted that they could do a better job. But I think it's some event people and maybe some traders. Often that's where the complaints come from, don't they, about Christmas decorations and the amount of effort a council goes to. But, how much money to spend on Christmas decorations? What's the right balance?
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, Chris. I tell you, every single year that we rolled out Christmas decorations in my senior years in local government, there were always complaints.
Yes.
You either didn't have enough, they would, they weren't appropriate. You had too much, you'd spent too much.
Spending too much, yeah.
You're spending too much, and everybody has really different views around this, and it's so hard for councils in this space to get it right, because there'll always be people that won't be happy. So I think you've just got to be, my advice would be just to be modest. If you want the gold-plated, Christmas decorations, which I know Tony knows about the gold-plated Christmas decorations. He might share that story. You need to be able to fund it in an appropriate way. Should it really be funded by council rates is probably my question. Maybe there needs to be a special charge scheme with marketing and promotion through the traders or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Tony?
Yeah, well, look, when you talk about the gold-plated versions, the first one that came to mind, of course, was here in Victoria, City of Greater Geelong, only a couple of years ago. Do you remember 2019?
I think it was back in Darren Lyon's time, wasn't it?
Yeah, the 2019, the floating Christmas tree, $500,000 plus it cost, and attracted both, plaudits and criticism. And I suppose, looking back now, I think it was nearly $600,000 worth, 580 something thousand. City of Greater Geelong have its financial challenges at the moment. I wonder whether they'd do that sort of thing again. But what takes the cake is in Belgrade in Serbia, where the council spent £2.56 million on Christmas decorations, just over the top. And there was a groundswell of outrage from taxpayers about the cost of Christmas decorations back in 2018. And then something has occurred last year. City of Banyule, I remember, the boulevard in Ivanhoe, and council cut back last year on the traffic management arrangements, the number of days that council officers would be there helping, manage traffic control through that street that there's long for many, many years has been, particular focus on, Christmas decorations. And there were significant complaints from residents of the boulevard in Ivanhoe about Banyule Council's new approach and lack of promotion of the Christmas lights. So it'll be interesting what approach Banyule take this year, given last year's sort of seeming more minimalising its efforts there.
Tony's putting our research skills to shame this week, Julie, although I know you've got a couple of special mentions before we wrap up. I knew you'd be watching the King's speech this week in the UK Parliament.
I didn't actually watch it, but I did look at what was announced and what I was really interested in, and I thought you would be excited about this one, Chris, is about automated vehicles. And so there was an automated vehicles bill announced in the King's speech on the 7th of November. And this bill will allow autonomous vehicles to operate without safety drivers on roads for the first time across Britain.
Wow.
So this is exciting stuff. So I can't wait to get into my autonomous vehicle and drive around London. But anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I'd love to.
You won't be driving. You won't be driving. It'll be driving you.
Around London. That's right. Yeah, driving around hands-free.
Let them try it out over there. Just on the King's speech, that was one of a number of bills that sort of intersect with local government, but local government generally was very disappointed not to see anything in the speech about dealing with the current financial crisis that councils over there have.
That's right. There was a comment about that, Chris. I mean, there were some things around housing, but again, not a lot to help local government, which was interesting. So, but look, the local government association over there have come out around these autonomous vehicles bill, basically said that they welcome it. Councils really want to continue to ensure safety and public health, regardless of the mode of travel. And keeping congestion, free. So they've made comments about this. They will no doubt be watching this really carefully. And they're saying that councils are really leading the way in digitalisation in relation to their traffic regulation orders and managing their streets effectively. So they're saying that councils are doing a good job in this space, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond to this as it rolls out. So look, we're on the brink of big change. So
fascinating. Yeah. I know you've got another special mention. We'll come back to that in just a sec.
Yeah.
You've got a special mention this week, Tony, from Australia's home of country music. I'm not sure it is anymore, actually. I think Queensland might have taken the crown,
there
but I am digressing.
Yeah.
But anyway,
who would have thought that 135 years of electric street lighting being celebrated in Australia this week, 135 years in Australia, and
really?
Not in Sydney, not in Melbourne, Brisbane. It's in, as you say, Tamworth.
Wow.
In November 9, 1888, the first electric street lighting in a town, suburb, city went up in Australia, replacing gas lighting in Tamworth after one of the aldermen went off on a fact-finding mission to the UK. Must have jumped on a boat. That would have been an interesting trip back to the mother country. And the mayoress at the time, she turned the lights on in a ceremony. But this new development, Chris and Julie, wasn't without its controversy, because a review in the local newspapers at the time shows that there was one gentleman not very happy at all, saying that the new electric lights made the women look too pale. So I think we look through we sort of go through a different filter or prism making decisions now, don't we?
We do.
Than back in 1888 in Tamworth. But there you go, 135 years of electric lights.
Good pick up that, and it occurs to me that gas lighting means something completely different now.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks,
exactly.
Tony. And
that's
Julie,
right.
This is for fellow planners like you. I'm not a planner, don't get me wrong.
Can't take
it was a special day this week.
Can't take the planner out of a woman. Just wanted to let everybody know, and just a shout out to all the planners in the local government sector, particularly this week, and all those councillors that deal with planning issues every single week that struggle with the complexity of it. Well, this week was World Town Planning Day on the 8th of November. So planners and communities all over the world come together and celebrate how good planning improves lives of people and benefits society at large, creating places where to live, work and play together. And it actually comes from an Argentinian professor, Carlos Maria del Calera, a graduate at the Institut d'Urbanisme in Paris, started World Town Planning Day in Buenos Aires in 1949. So it's celebrated across 30 countries, including Australia. So all the Australian planners this week have been celebrating, sharing their knowledge and leading practices with colleagues around the world on this day. So, and also learning from international success stories in relation to housing and building resilience and etc. So look, it's it's just something to sing from the rooftops. Us planners love Town Planning Day. And congratulations to all our planners out there.
Julie, if there was an event, I don't know if there was a gathering in Melbourne or Victoria, but could have been sponsored by the Department of Transport and Planning, and with little flyers for the 90 new job vacancies, maybe.
Yeah,
good point.
I think
Just
there were
thinking of marketing
celebrations. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, in hindsight, they should have timed that announcement for World Town Planning Day, shouldn't they?
Well,
we're getting dangerously close to being educational on this program. Thank you. Thank you for picking up on that one. Julie, I'd like to know, when is World Council Governance Officer Day?
Oh, I don't know, but we should start it.
Indeed. Before we wrap up, I think that's all we had on our list. Have I missed anything, folks? No, nothing else. Just want to remind you about the VLGA's Fast Track Day, which is coming up next Friday, the 17th of November. I think there's still some places if you would like to come along and benefit from what is going to be a fabulous day on civility and local government with some extraordinary speakers. We've got Nicholas Rees, the Deputy Mayor from the City of Melbourne, Sheena Frost, the CEO of Hume City Council, and a big long list of experts on the subject joining us, plus the Minister for Local Government in person, Melissa Horn. That's at the RACV Club, and all the details are on the VLGA website. I just want to thank Julie Reid for joining us again this week on TGU. Always great to have you here, Julie, and all the best for the week ahead.
Thanks, Chris. My pleasure. Great to see you again.
And I want to thank Tony Raunic and his team at Hunt & Hunt Lawyers who sponsored the program, and give him this hour or so every week to come along and just shoot the breeze with us on local government stuff, Tony.
Great fun. Love it. And everyone have a great weekend, and talk to you again next week.
Couldn't have said it better myself, so I won't repeat that. We'll see you again soon on TGU. Bye for now.